God level mirrorless camera shootout. Leica SL3, Fujifilm GFX 100 Mark II, full frame, medium format. Where does your $7,000 or $7,500 go? Let's find out in this video.
So as you saw from the intro, I got my grubby little paws on two of the best, if not the best cameras on the market. The Fujifilm GFX 100 Mark II, the second, and the Leica SL3. In an interesting foreshadowing, the GFX 100 Mark II was readily available on launch day. I actually heard about it coming out like the day before launch day. The local camera store here, Precision Camera, was sort of intimating that they were going to have cameras on launch day ready for sale. So I put my money down, and sure enough, I got the camera the first day it was available. And the GFX 100 Mark II has continued to be available since launch day. On the other hand, the Leica SL3, well, I was lucky to get one. I got up early on launch day, tapped the refresh button until it was available on the website, not through the local camera store, and I got one. But now they're going to be sold out till June at the earliest, I hear. So, a very different supply chain and production model, and a very different availability of the cameras. I understand why Leica does it this way, and now also Hasselblad. And, Fujifilm to some extent with the X100 VI, but generally I don't think that's Fujifilm's way of operating. But it's to create demand for these cameras as luxury good items. Whereas the Fujifilm GFX 100, I feel like, is more of a working photographer's camera, so it has to be available. You have to be able to buy another one if one goes down. And I think that really is sort of the distinction that's making me struggle so much with these cameras. The Fujifilm GFX 100 Mark II is clearly the better professional tool. The medium format sensor gathers more light, it has more dynamic range, the colors are richer, they're 16-bit colors, the files are way easier to edit, and the image quality is stupendous. On the other hand, the Leica SL3 is just a luxurious, superb, sublime experience. The menus are easy to navigate, whereas the Fuji menus are a mess. The viewfinder is gorgeous. The back screen is pristine. But for one issue, what you see is what you get. And I'll show you here what I'm talking about. See if I can show you on screen here. Start the camera up here. But this is a huge problem with the SL3 and the Q3, that when you go to expose something, let's see if I can get this to work. So that's good exposure, right? But let's say I wanted to underexpose something for whatever reason, right? Okay, now you can see it's quite dark, and that's how the photo will come out on the picture. But when I half press the shutter, boom, it lights up. Which is super annoying, especially now that you have good tracking autofocus on these cameras. It makes hitting exposure extremely difficult because it always seems like you're overexposed if you're properly exposed. I understand that works great if you're shooting flash, but there is no option in the menu that I could find that turns this off, and I'm not always shooting with flash. So, that alone sort of kills the experience, especially if you're shooting at night or you want really dark, underexposed, moody images. It's really hard to get with the SL3. But I digress. Let's go through a quick list of items and, talk about why I'm having such a hard time deciding between these cameras. First item is user experience. The Leica SL3 is just better. Here's a little rant about the menu systems. A great example of the difference in complexity of use between the Leica SL3 and the GFX 100, the second Mark II, are the menu systems. Is the menu systems. I don't know what's grammatically correct. Just to give you an idea, okay, the Leica SL3 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets of menu pages, and the seventh one is more like a half page. Most of the items don't have a ton of things under them, or are single item things. There's a couple like auto review is just a single item thing. Shutter type is a single item thing. you know, there's a couple, like the camera settings, that have a few sub-menus, but even then, it's 2 pages long. Okay? So you figure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 pages times, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items, 50 to 100 total menu items, right? Also, it's totally touch enabled, just like a Canon camera. You can swipe, touch, everything works great. I don't want to do that because I don't want to change the menu, but super simple, super clean and easy to use. Similarly, the landing page when you hit menu is just gorgeous. Look at that. You can see the reflection of me, but you can also see the icons, and you have everything you would want when shooting, okay? Right? Shutter speed, aperture, focus mode, ISO, metering, common sense things, right? Also, if you want to switch to video, boop, you just touch it. You just touch it, and then you're in video. If you want to get out of video, boop, you touch photo. Similarly, if you're, you know, in photo here, all you do is you press a button, boom, and it goes to video. Super simple. Everything is just kind of laid out and makes sense, you know. ISO, shutter speed, aperture, or aperture here when you do it like this. That's why I like these lenses. Just all makes sense, okay? Let's look at the GFX, okay? Go to menu here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're on another one. 1, 2, 3. We're at 7 already, okay? And now 3 here. We're at 10. Flash, there's just 1, so that's 11. Setup, there's 12. Connection, there's 13, 14. So double the landing ones. And I will tell you what, most of these, or a lot of these on the Fuji, are like very deep and have like several of their own menus. You know, here has 2. You know, here has 3. Okay, so we'll just say 14 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is like 100 at least. So double, and then you figure some of these have 3 or 4 menus, sub-menus. So you're at potentially something like 150, 200, maybe even 250 menu pages. Okay, menu option pages. So, I'm sorry, you have like 250 menu options versus 50. That's 5 times the number of things to monkey with. Fuji cameras are so fidgety and futzy. They really need to clean this up, take a page out of Leica's playbook, and go back to the simplicity of like their OG X100 no number cameras, and just get down to the basics. You know, similarly, like the controls, like none of the exposure triangle is on here. Like, again, why isn't it, you know, ISO, shutter speed, and then aperture? Maybe white balance, I don't know. And then like, good luck finding metering on this, right? You go to the Q menu, okay? Which, so again, there's no landing page for this. You go to the Q menu, it's kind of like the landing page on the Leica, but there's no metering on here. There's no drive mode on here, right? You got ISO and white balance and the film simulations, okay? And then a bunch of crap you don't really need, you know? Why isn't it just set up at a camera that you would have, you know, shutter speed, ISO, aperture, and metering, white balance on the landing page? None of this makes any sense, okay? To get to movie mode, you just hit this switch. They do get that right. That's as good as the Leica, maybe even better because it's labeled, so that's cool. But you have the same amount of insane menu options and all that stuff on here. So I don't know, man. Like, make it more like this switch and less like the rest of this camera. Go back to like the XT5. Make an XT5 version of this. That would compete so much better than the SL3, make life so much easier. The joy of the XT5 is that you can avoid all of Fuji's menus. Hang on, I'll grab my XT5, I'll show you. You can avoid the terrors of the Fuji menu system because you've got, guess what? ISO, shutter speed, and aperture right there at your fingertips, you know, or you can do shutter speed and aperture here if you really, you know, love the PSM nightmare, you know, modern Sony camera nightmare. You can do both. Like, why not do it that way? Leica figured out this is the best way to do things. They basically copied Fuji here, you know? So, you know, like, I think I'll make a whole separate video about this. Hang on a second, I got another thing to say about this. I'll make a whole separate video about this, I think. But, you know, the theme of that video will be Fuji used to do stuff better. Right? Like, they tried to move away from this form factor and turn this into a hybrid camera. They went back to basically the XT1, XT3 size. Although I did like that XT4 grip a little bit better. You got to add a grip on this to make it like the XT4 grip. But I digress. You know, this is an OG layout of a camera with all these dials. And they're making these XH2, XS20 cameras that don't have the tactile nature. Like, why did they change the XH1 to XH2? The XH1 was like a near perfect camera. It was just under-spec'd and got spanked by the A7 III. But like in terms of ergonomics and tactility, it was like a perfect camera. I'll put a picture of it up above. You can see it had the magic Fuji dials. Why they got rid of that in the XH2 and XH2S is beyond me. I think they're doing it for cost reasons, but it's a bad decision, which the thing that makes Fujifilm cameras so fun to use, these dials, that's what makes it different from a Sony camera, right? You're not winning on specs with these guys. You're winning on the fun experience of shooting it, not unlike Leica, the joy and elegant experience of a Leica, right? Like, the Sony a7R5 is a more performant camera than the SL3. I could buy a Sony a7R5, but I picked the SL3 over that for a full-frame solution because it's more fun to use. The color science is better. It's just a great experience. Like, and it does everything I needed to do also. Kind of like this. Great experience, and for the most part, you know, besides the limitations of APS-C, and I'll have a whole other video about Fuji color science, like, it does what you need it to do, and it's still fun to use. Like, you could use this in a professional setting, but it's fun to use, even when you're not using it in a professional setting. And it works just fine for a professional setting, right? So, you know, like, Fuji has kept aperture rings on its lenses, but man, they've totally missed the boat on their manual focusing experience. People, I think, have forgotten. They used to have focus clutches on their lenses, like Hasselblad lenses. So you have a distance scale. You can manually focus and zone focus with this bad boy, okay? If they figured out the X Pro 4 and had a bunch of these lenses, maybe even figure out a real rangefinder experience, or I have a video about this, fix their digital rangefinder patch, put focus peaking in it, I mean, they would have a Leica killer with the X Pro 4, right? This is a Hasselblad medium format level feature. Like, why would you stop doing this on your lenses? This makes it so much fun, right? Why did you make it more like a Sony lens? I don't get it, you know? Put aperture and distance scale on here. You've got, you know, more tactility. That's what makes your cameras fun to use, Fuji. Similarly, like, look at the X100, the original one, versus the X100 It's smaller, it's lighter, the controls were simpler. It doesn't need a joystick, though. But, you know, and, like, this was an innovation at the time. Like, do more stuff like this. Be innovative. This is what wins users. This is what makes Fujifilm great. Okay, look how cool and little and fun this looks and tactile it is, you know. I do like the lift ISO thing on the later models. So there's a couple things, but like for a first effort, this was fantastic. Look how cool this looks. Look how boring this looks, okay? Fujifilm, get your act together. Go back to the tactile, fun, retro-inspired cameras. Make me an XT5 version of this, or even better, an X Pro version of this. You did it once, do it again. And then, you know, also just fix your menus. You know, do what Japanese camera companies have been doing for generations now. Rip off Leica. Take a look at their menu, copy it, paste it into your cameras, and clean up the mess that is your menus now. You know, dials, better menu. Oh man, you've got a winning combination. Just imagine a medium format, fun to use camera, not a boring workhorse, you know, professional Sony copy, right? With clean menus, you know, then we're talking, okay? Until then, Fuji, this is why I might sell this, you know, image making beast of a camera that overall has better image quality than the Leica SL3. But the SL3 has some of this kind of DNA in it. It's just freaking fun to use, you know? On top of that, this is like the best image quality that I've ever seen coming out of a full frame camera. I love the color science in this. You know, as I talked about in a previous video, I can link that up here. You know, I'm worried less about like camera features this year and going forward, I think in the future forever. And I'm more interested in, you know, what will help me create my look. I'll make another video with this because I'm still kind of experimenting with it. But I think that like, you know, the Leica SL3 and the Hasselblad cameras have very similar color science, and that's really what I'm drawn to. Maybe it's a European thing. I don't really know. But I feel like that's going to be closer to my look than what the Fuji cameras give. Fuji cameras, while the filming simulations are cool, none of them give a really like neutral, natural tone that I can then put my own, you know, artistic flair on. Fuji's already baking in their own artistic flair, which isn't always the look I'm going for. So I think for someone getting into digital photography, it's really great. But for someone who's been in the game a while and is trying to get professional, you know, even, you know, artistic fine art results, this is a better base starting point to get my look. You know, this kind of drives my look. So it might be like a camera, like a glass, not Fuji camera, like a glass, which I was initially thinking might be the move in 2024. I do think that the menu system Rant kind of says it all about these cameras. The SL3, but for that exposure brightening issue that I talked about at the top of this video, is just a much more enjoyable experience. Even though it has a lower res viewfinder, just the way that the colors are tuned and they're accurate to the picture you actually get, whereas the Fujifilm, the viewfinder is always kind of blue and it's a little bit off from the pictures you actually get, the files you actually get. Both are very usable, but there's certain things sort of hobbling the SL3. It has a very low drive mode for shutter speed. If you're shooting fast-moving subjects, ka-kung is about as good as you get, where like they've made the GFX 100 kind of a speed demon, even though it goes to like 12-bit color and all this stuff that like Petapixel complained about. The images still look great. So like if you're doing anything that is like not like slow down, think about what you're doing, fast action, the GFX is getting closer and closer. You know, it makes me wonder if Fuji in like a generation or two can really like get its autofocus, get its, you know, game up to Canon and Sony, and then they'll be like the best camera just all around. The SL3, in video, the autofocus is terrible. In photo, it's quite good. I would say it's on par, maybe a little worse than the S5 IIX, which is to say like a little worse than Sony and Canon, but very usable, way, way better than the SL2 in the contrast detect autofocus from the SL2 and SL2S. And I would say the GFX is probably on par for photo and better in video, but still not great in video. You know, depending on the conditions, that kind of thing, you may miss a shot or two more with the GFX just because it's a bigger sensor. It takes a little longer to scan at slower shutter speeds, especially. There is still like a little bit of a with the GFX because of that big shutter, but pretty comparable. I don't know what's up with the SL3. The thing can't focus in video. I'm sure it has really nice video if you could focus it, but it doesn't. The GFX 100 Mark II hunts, and I don't think you can really use it for something like this, vlogging, you know, talking head in front of the camera. It still misses focus and it like hunts if you do this. Whereas the Panasonic S5 IIX I'm filming on has gotten pretty good at this and doesn't hunt as much. They've sort of gotten to almost Sony level now with that stuff. But otherwise, if you're behind the camera, the GFX 100 Mark II might be the best non-cinema camera on the market. The different aspect ratios you can use that with that sensor, the file coming out of it, just the colors coming out of it is just superb. So that's got me really excited in terms of video in the future with Fujifilm. I tried the XH2S, and I love the colors and the image coming out of it, but it's kind of the same thing. The Fuji focus just sucks eggs. I've had to scrap a number of videos because of all the hunting and missed focus and stuff. And that's got me back on the S5 IIX here. I had originally bought the S5 IIX thinking, well, hey, I'll get the SL3 and then I'll just use L-mount glass for everything. But as we get into this video, I'm not sure I'm keeping the SL3. So that's sort of an interesting thing. Okay, image quality. I'll throw up a few samples here. Just for fun, I also used the Hasselblad X2D and my 907 XC52, whatever, and threw some of those in there. So, you know, I'll put camera A, B, and C, and then I'll tell you which camera was which, and then we can talk more about, you know, the value of these two cameras. So camera A was the Leica, camera B was the Hasselblad, and camera C was the Fuji. Did you get it right? How many did you get right? Let me know in the comments below. Honestly, if you used Leica glass on the SL3 straight out of camera, it might be a better image than the image coming out of the GFX 100 Mark II. But as soon as you start editing the files, there's no contest. The GFX 100 Mark II, the files are so much more flexible and malleable. You can do basically anything with them. You know, the more I'm getting into this, the more I'm getting into color grading in Capture One. I've been taking classes about it, actually. You know, I just really appreciate the medium format files. Whereas, you know, the SL3, if you're coming from a smaller sensor camera, the full frame sensor is pretty impressive in terms of dynamic range and all that good stuff. It's very high megapixel, very detailed files, but just nothing in comparison to the Fujifilm GFX 100 files. I mean, and also the files that come out of this thing, the 907X 100C. I rented this to kind of compare. You know, short preview is I'm not buying it. Image quality is sort of an interesting thing. You know, the SL3, when you use Leica glass, is about as good as medium format coming out of the camera. However, as soon as you put a Sigma lens or a Panasonic lens on it, it's good, but it's just regular full frame image quality. You know, it is, you know, good old Sony, Panasonic, Canon level image quality. Nothing to sniff at, totally a professional result, but just not what you get when you put Leica glass on a camera. Many people say, you know, you date the camera body, but you marry the lenses. But in this case, you know, this wedding, this little lady might be too expensive for my taste. I might not be able to afford this marriage, you know. These lenses are considerably more expensive than the comparable lenses in the GFX line. And, you know, the things that make the image quality better, like the super perfect corner sharpness and like the cleanliness across the image, are so minuscule in comparison that I don't really think that the price bump is worth it. Especially because there's nothing on these lenses. There's no aperture ring. There's no distance scale. You know, if they did them like the M lenses, I might have a different feeling. But this is just a black tube as far as I'm concerned. It's not super compelling. On top of the fact that, you know, essentially it's bigger than the medium format counterpart. You know, the 55mm f1.7 is a little beefier, but it's certainly shorter. And, you know, if you apply the medium format crop factor, it's actually faster than this 1.4 lens, too. It's more like a 1.2, even though it's an f1.7 lens on paper. And then, similarly, if you take the 45 millimeter, it's much smaller than the Leica full frame lens here. Along those same lines, the Hasselblad 55 millimeter is also way smaller than this full frame 50 millimeter from Leica. I am curious why, this lens came out first. Why did Fujifilm release a 55 that's this big? Admittedly, this is like a 2.4 or a 2.5, and this is a 1.7. But like on medium format, I don't know. Like, I don't know that you really need a 1.7, but I guess that's the differentiating factor. And then when you compare it to a similar, I think this is a 2.8, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is a 2.8, this is a 2.5. Then they're very similar. I almost wish Fuji would make more of these smaller lenses. I don't think you really need that super shallow depth of field very often. But at the same time, I do love the image coming out of this. So I don't know. Lots to think about there. So, in terms of image quality, with Leica glass on the SL3, it's a tie. Without Leica glass, the GFX wins. If we're talking about just like richness of colors and editing and dynamic range and all those things, the GFX wins. So, if I could give it a half point or something, maybe I would give it to the GFX. But I think I'll just call it a tie because it really depends on your use case, I think. In terms of lens selection, it's sort of an interesting thing. You have the L-mount alliance for the SL3. But as I've said, really, you need Leica lenses to get it to the top of the pops. Without it, you have Sigma, Panasonic, a few other manufacturers. And so there's a wide range of lenses, but like for actual, like a working photographer, a lot of the lenses kind of don't make sense. They just came out with a decent sized macro, a Panasonic did, the 100 millimeter. There's a lot of things that are missing. For example, the Fujifilm, which has had a macro lens forever, Fujifilm has gotten these tilt shift lenses that I'm really excited to try out. That's something that's really like leaning me towards the Fuji is, tilt shift lenses. Supposedly you're getting a big telephoto lens, like a 500 millimeter. I have no use for that, but just the fact that they're making lenses that, a working professional would want with the system makes it really interesting to me. Another factor is just sort of like system simplicity. I think that Fujifilm kind of screwed up, differentiating between medium format and then sticking with just APS-C. The APS-C sensor, while quite good and, kind of the same conversation with the SL3 with non-Leica lenses, the new 41, 42 megapixel sensor on the X-T5 and the X-H2, like if you know what you're doing and you expose properly, it's very hard to tell the difference, if there's any difference at all, between, an X-T5 photo, an SL3 or a Q3 photo. The reds, Leica does a little different. They have darker midtones, but you can fix those things in Capture One for the most part pretty quickly. So, very hard to tell the difference, but I do wish Fuji just had a full frame option, even if it was just limited, even if you had to put the APS-C glass on the full frame cameras, that would sort of eliminate the need. Or, I wish that Fuji had just like jumped a little more ahead with the medium format. It's so close to being as good as full frame cameras. And like in a lot of ways, like the autofocus, it pretty much is as good as the SL3, but the Sonys, the Canons, and to a slightly lesser extent, but very close, the Nikons of the world are still out there. And their autofocus is just way better. Their video autofocus is like leaps and bounds ahead. That might be more of a Fujifilm issue than a medium format issue, but I think you understand what I mean. Or alternatively, I think a solution to this would be if Fuji came out with like more of like a fun medium format camera as well. The GFX 100 Mark II is a workman's camera. It is great in the studio. It just pumps out photos, but it's not so good for everyday carry or like street photography. It's just a little too big, a little too bulky. These lenses, not on the Leica, just don't really work for street photography. It's too much. I don't want my wrists hurting at the end of a fun, walk downtown. I wish they would make a smaller, compact camera, not unlike this. Maybe not this form factor. This is actually, initially it's a lot of fun, but then, after you use it for a while, and I've been using the 50 megapixel one, you realize there's a lot of limitations. It's harder to use in the studio. You can't really use it in the street as easily, but it does look sexy. But, clearly Fuji could come out with something much smaller than the GFX 100 Mark II and make it for medium format. I understand there's some rumors that they're going to come out with a 100S, but it seems like it's going to be in the same body. And I think that's a real shame. They should make an XT5 medium format camera. That might be my dream camera. That might be like, especially if they fix it so that the shutter comes over the sensor so you don't get dust on the sensor when you're changing lenses. That's it, like done. I'm stoked. You got me. Or even like more, an X Pro medium format camera. Woo! You got me. You got me. This is kind of like my rant about the Leica Q series. If they would just make that interchangeable lens, that might be a perfect camera as well. The Q series also needs a joystick, by the way. But like, I mean, that's pretty much all it would take, you know. And if Fuji does a medium format version of that, that beats out the Q3 Dream camera or the Q2 Dream camera or QM, you know, I don't know, R interchangeable lens camera, whatever Leica might call it. That beats it out because the medium format sensor is better. Frankly, the Leica lenses are what really sort of made the difference for me. When you pair the SL3 with Leica glass, in particular that 50mm f1.4 Summilux, oh man, like you cannot tell the difference between a medium format camera and that Leica, and you just get even like a cleaner rendering, the Leica fall off, the micro contrast, it is just sublime. Now, to be honest, you don't get quite that good of results if you're using Sigma or Panasonic glass, but it's still pretty darn good. Better than like an APS-C camera like the XT5 or something. But, you know, like the XT5 and the 56mm, which is like the best lens with their best sensor, you know, comes close, is comparable to like the SL3 with, let's say, like a contemporary Sigma lens. But as soon as you get into the Sigma art lenses and some of the higher end Panasonic stuff, it pulls away from APS-C, and you're definitely in the top of full frame with like, you know, Sony and Canon and that kind of thing. And then there's this next level with Leica glass that basically puts it in consumer grade medium format, you know, where you don't really need the GFX or Hasselblad if you had the SL3 and some Leica glass, because you're going to get very similar image quality, albeit, you know, less flexible files. You're not going to get as much dynamic range and that kind of a thing. But frankly, if you're using those Leica lenses, in most cases, you're probably in a pretty controlled environment because they're kind of slow to focus. So, you know, you're kind of using it as a medium format camera anyways. But, you know, what has me really excited is the idea of Leica making a medium format system with Leica quality glass that I think will be head and shoulders above the Hasselblad and the Fuji medium format systems that are currently available. You know, I think then the test will be, how does the, you know, the Leica S4 or whatever it's going to be called, how does that compare to like a phase 1 camera or like an H6D 100, although that's getting awfully long in the tooth. The image quality is not up to like modern standards, candidly. So, you know, we'll see. Fingers crossed, Leica, come on, come out with that medium format system. So as you can see, it's like, you know, the SL3 looks pretty close to medium format, though. You can get a shallower depth of field if you're using Sigma glass. You know, they have a 50 f1.2 now. That's, you know, whatever 0.5 of a stop is, like a quarter of a stop, I think, probably, maybe half a stop. You know, more shallow depth of field. And the lens is like, even like the 90, I think it's f2, is like this big, whereas the GFX is like, you know, this big. So, you know, you have a much more portable, much more carryable system, although I don't love the grip on the SL3. I have a whole video about that, my first impressions of that camera, and I'll put out a final review. But it's just a much more sort of like portable, easy to carry around system. It fits in a brevity bag. I have a video about that. The GFX system won't fit in the brevity bag. When Brevity reached out and asked me to test out their bag, I actually said, you know, well, look, I'm using the GFX system a lot now. It won't fit in there. And they said, that's okay. You know, try something else. Well, great. I'm so glad I did, because the SL3 fits great in there, as you saw in my video about that. So anyways, so the Leica SL3, much more portable. I like the colors coming out of it better. You know, I think that's a more high-end, fine art even, like commercial grade, professional quality set of colors. And I, of course, love the Leica menu system. The Fuji menu system's a mess. Even though it's more expensive, the files are less flexible in editing. I still think that Leica is the way to go for me. I love the way the lenses render. It's incredibly clear, crisp, but like still natural with a great fall off. Just Leica lenses really are incredible. And that's really what sells me. And that's what's making me so excited for the possibility of a Leica medium format system. I just think it'll be head and shoulders better than the Hasselblad and Fuji systems that are currently available. And I'm willing to wait. Or am I? Maybe I'll just get an S3 and a couple of lenses and see how that rolls. I've had it once. I might have to do it again. I'm going to apologize to my pocketbook and my credit card in advance. But yeah, so those are the reasons that I went with the SL3. I'm selling the Fujifilm gear off. I'm going to sell all my APS-C gear off because I feel like the SL3 does both the medium format job and it does the APS-C carry-around job paired with a Q3. So, you know, I'll get more into my kit, you know, going forward after I've made this decision in my next video or one of my next videos. No promises. I don't have a schedule. I don't program this stuff out. But soon I'll make a video about it. And, you know, I think paired, you know, the SL3, the Q3, that's really all you need. You know, I have an MLM and monochrome. I'll probably keep that, but you don't really need that camera. And then I have this S5 IIX, which I'm filming on, which will replace the Fuji X-H2S. Another reason that I sort of, you know, weighed in favor of the SL3 is that I feel like the SL3 can sort of do double duty for me. I don't need a medium format system and an APS-C system, you know, for like the medium format for more studio focused, you know, commercial paid shoots, and this for more like walk around or like in the street shooting. The SL3 can kind of do both, and it gives me better image quality than the APS-C cameras generally from Fuji. It gives me better image quality probably than a Canon or a Sony would. And then it also gives comparable and sometimes even better image quality when using like a glass to many, you know, the crop sensor medium format cameras. So, you know, in a year where I am trying to minimize and sell off gear and, you know, pay down my credit card, having less cameras in the same system is really compelling to me. Another reason I'm going with the SL3 is that I just like the colors, the rendering that come out of the camera. You know, Fuji actually comes very close. It's not that different of a rendering. Hasselblad also fairly close. You know, as you learn to tweak the Fuji files, you can kind of get it to look like the Hasselblad. So, you know, it's all in the same ballpark, especially if you're using lighting properly and those kinds of things and nailing exposure. But I just feel like the Leica is a little bit closer to what I just imagine the picture looking like, what I want the photos to come out looking like. And as I've said in a couple of videos now, I can link one up here, you know, is besides minimizing gear, another goal of mine is really to sort of nail down my look. And I feel like Leica cameras get closest to the look I'm going for. Man, I hope they come up with a medium format camera. And so, you know, rather than have a bunch of Fujifilm cameras and a bunch of lenses, you know, a medium format system and an APS-C system, I just think having one camera that just outputs my look, or the, you know, the raw baseline thing to help create my look, just simplifying all of that to then focus on the actual imagery, the actual editing, those kinds of things. I think that's going to be really helpful, and I'm pretty excited about it. So, you know, lots of reasons. You know, I think for a lot of people this doesn't make sense. From a cost perspective, it doesn't necessarily make sense. You can get a medium format system from Fuji. It's actually cheaper, at least new, than the Leica SL3 paired with Leica glass. So, you know, I know this won't be for everybody, but for people where, you know, you want to invest in a system, look, these cameras should last me 5 years. I probably won't buy any more camera bodies. I'm going to have to come up with other things to talk about on this channel, or just rent gear, you know, and be later to reviewing gear when it comes out. But for me, this just makes sense. It's not necessarily a, you know, money is no object kind of a decision. I'm going to amortize the cost of these cameras over years of use. Whereas with the Fuji, you know, it comes out every couple of years. You get a new one to sort of keep up with the full frame competitors, or, you know, medium format, keep up with Hasselblad. Whereas Leica is sort of in a class of its own. I'll make another video about this. I sort of got into this in my initial impressions of the SL3. But I just think Leica's done a really good job of future-proofing the camera. It kind of does everything I want it to do. And, you know, subject to some very small niggles, you know, there really isn't anything more I would need out of a camera at this point. So, yeah. So have you used the SL3? I know they're really hard to get. You know, are you surprised by these results? Should I go with the medium format? Am I making a huge mistake? Should I hang on to the Fujifilm system? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Happy to answer questions, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.